Now I'd like to introduce Judy Parkes from ARO.
I'll be lurking around the back during the breaks, as Clint said, so please feel free to come up and talk to me about anything that you would like to know about education in general or ARO. I'm not here to spruik ARO to you today. I'm actually here to talk about education more broadly. So just so I can get a sense of who's in the room, could you please raise your hand if you are the manager of a large team, so maybe managing more than 30 people or something like that. If you can just let me know, there's a couple of hands up. If you supervise staff, so if you've got people directly reporting to you, one or more, any of those people here? A lot of supervisors, okay. What about if you're actually on the tools? If you go out there every day in the rain, do the work. Yeah, oh, look at that. A lot of people there, okay. And now I'm just, who works for a private organisation, so a non-government organisation? Okay. None. So everyone's local government or state government or something like that? Yep. Councils? Okay, thank you. Okay, the first one is, okay, click. Staff training. So there's two aspects to staff training. Staff training can bring business benefits, so direct business benefits. And when I say business, that's councils or businesses as well, right? They're just running on ratepayers' money. So there's benefits to a business that relate to all sorts of aspects that you might not even think about. Then there's also risk mitigation. I'll be sharing that with you today so that you're going to leave the room at least knowing that there is a need for training in your organisations. The next one is federal funding and state subsidies. Now, federal funding is available to employers as well as students. So I'm going to talk to you about how to get access to that. State subsidies, the South Australian government's one of the more generous governments around training, particularly around the open spaces because they see so much need. Think of all the big projects that they've got going on. Not only have councils got large projects, but the state government does as well. So they want to make sure that they've got the workforce trained for the future. Vocational education and training. I said to my partner, do you know what vocational education and training is? He said, no. And I said, that's what I do every day, mate. So the vocational education is different to academic education, and we'll just discuss the differences. Then also the, working now? The arrow on the right. I'm clicking it to the computer. No, sorry, I'm just going to go at this when I need it clicked. Is that okay? Click. The value of mentoring. So I've got Chris from my team here who has been involved in mentoring, seen it working well, seen it not working well. We're going to just talk about that because that doesn't cost anything other than time. And click. About me. Okay. I'm a long-time nerd, so I have been in the IT industry since the mid-1980s. I was a programmer, they called them at the time, I think they call them developers now, and I worked a lot with actuaries around the world, so you can't get more of a nerd than someone with IT and actuarial background. But I don't like doing that, and in 2020 I had a bit of an epiphany that I didn't want to do that anymore. I'm a lifelong learner, so I actually left school at the end of year 11. Decided that earning money was far more interesting than doing my HSC in Sydney, and realised not long after that that I actually probably did need some sort of education. So as an adult, I've put myself through different courses. I'm a graduate of the Institute of Company Directors. I've got an advanced diploma of business. I'm currently doing my training qualification, and I'm a qualified assessor. I've done some other stuff too. Randomly, I've got a diploma of theology. So I think that it's really important that we don't just stop when we finish school and do whatever we do. You need to keep learning because otherwise you're going to stagnate, and it's shown to be good for your brain to be learning. I used to work for a dementia organisation, and people with dementia often don't do a lot of thinking. Next one is I'm an accidental South Australian. So as I said, I had a bit of an epiphany a few years ago. In 2020, my partner passed away. He was 60. And I thought, I don't want to be sitting in front of a computer anymore. So I had the opportunity to purchase ARO in South Australia, and I hadn't even been here. And I came across on day one of ownership, and I thought, yeah, I'll go back to Sydney soon. And I got here and I thought, this place is awesome. I absolutely love it here. And I rang my daughter one weekend. It was a Sunday afternoon. She said, what did you do today, Mum? I said, I went down to the beach, and then I came back through the McLaren Vale, had a couple of glasses of wine. And she goes, that's your idea of heaven. Here it is. Why would I go back? So sold up in Sydney, bought over in the Adelaide Hills, and I love it. So I'm accidental South Australian, and you guys don't know how lucky you've got it. If you haven't lived outside of South Australia, you're living in the best place. I am one of the directors, and I'm the co-owner of ARO College. I have someone else who has an education background, because it would be stupid of me to try and run an organisation I have no experience in. So he knows all about the education space, and I like talking to people. I'm on the board of the Master Landscapers along with Clint, and we're really proud that last year we petitioned to the government, and so now landscape construction is actually considered to be a trade, and so people get their trade certificate when they finish that. That was through the work of the Master Landscapers. I'm now keen to do the same thing for horticulturalists, and so I'm starting to try and find people to help me do that for them. I play competition tennis and I play pickleball. If you don't know what pickleball is, come and talk to me later. It's absolutely addictive, and it's really popular. They're pulling out tennis courts to put in pickleball courts. And nothing I say today is legal advice. Right? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not Judge Judy. This is not legal advice, but it's just what I've observed, what I've heard. I go to a lot of seminars, etc. You need to know this stuff, particularly if you are supervising people. Okay. So, click. We're going to start with the business benefits of training. That's some of our team around there. We try and do training really regularly. There are obvious benefits to training as teams. The first one would be talent attraction and retention. I don't know about you, but most of my clients say it's really hard to find people, particularly entry-level people. There's just not enough people for the jobs going around. We're also competing against the mining industry that pay top dollar. So there is a problem getting people to work. Right? Then once you've got them in and you've trained them, you want to retain them, because it costs a lot of money to find new team members and train them. So you want to attract them and you want to retain them. Training is a really good option. If someone has to choose between two jobs and one they end up with a qualification out of, they will, generally speaking, go to that job. It creates workers with compliance awareness, right? It's really important that people understand what their responsibilities are, and if they don't get trained, they don't know what they are. We can increase productivity due to skills confidence. If people don't know what they're meant to do, they generally won't do anything. So you need them to know what they're doing, and they'll become more productive. There's an aspect of emotional well-being with people being trained. They feel more confident. There'll be less sick days. It's basically proven through the Business Chamber of South Australia that people who have a good emotional well-being have less sick days. And there's a legal compliance aspect that we're going to look at quite a lot today around your responsibility as supervisors and managers of people. Okay. That's the benefits side of things, okay? Now, before we go into any more clicking, I just want to read you a recent testimonial from one of our clients. I'm not going to read the part about how great ARO is, but I'm just going to say it's been a complete pleasure working with us. And it says, the staff are really getting something out of this, far more than just a certificate. The staff have been motivated and more willing to perform. Right? Now, that was an outcome that this company did not expect when they engaged us to train their teams. They were focused all on the risk mitigation. They knew the problem of not having trained people. But all of a sudden, they've got a motivated and engaged team. And Chris actually came back from they're up in Berry yesterday and would vouch that this team is now really gelled together because they're all working with one purpose and everyone feels that they know what they're meant to be doing. Now let's look at through the lens of explaining to a judge what went wrong, okay? Right, risk mitigation. There is a raft of federal and state employment and wellbeing legislation that has come into effect over the last couple of years, and you don't want to have to say these three words. Well, Your Honour. Okay. Legal responsibilities. Okay, click. Legal responsibilities from your point of view as supervisors, you have to provide what's defined as information and training. So you have to provide your workers with the appropriate information, training, instruction and supervision so that they can work safely. Now that's just not about doing their physical work, that's about their emotional well-being as well. Okay? Then there's an awareness. You need to make sure that managers and supervisors and workers all recognise signs of psychological distress and how to manage risks. Okay? So there is SA legislation that came into effect in, I think it was August 2023. All of these things that people in business have to undertake. I draw your attention to the last two. You probably can't read it, but it says workplace interactions or behaviours. That's basically how we treat each other. and the information, training, instruction, supervision provided to workers. Now, if you are found to have breached any of those things, the corporation or the council in your case could be fined up to $3 million per incident, and you as the supervisor or manager can be fined $600,000, imprisoned for reckless conduct. Okay, so there's actually really big reason that I'm talking to you today. I'd rather use a carrot than a stick, but the stick is pretty big. Okay, thanks. Now, poor support. I don't know if you've heard this phrase. It's a legal phrase. And one of the claims that an employee can make against an organisation is for poor support. And that's classified in 3 different ways. They say if they've got inadequate emotional support from supervisors and co-workers, if they've got inadequate information or training to support their work performance, or inadequate tools, equipment, and resources to do the job. The times have changed. When I started working, there was the opposite of emotional support, I would say. And there was information and training given, but we weren't really assessed if we understood what was going on. So an example in South Australia was a recent law case where the managers of the organisation, so those of you that put your hands up as managers and supervisors, and the director of the company were held liable for the breaches of poor support. And the court noted that they had willful blindness and failure to make reasonable inquiries, and that was not an excuse. And they were fined and one person was imprisoned. So there's a precedent there that ignorance is no defence. And unfortunately, now you're going to walk out the door and you're no longer ignorant. Okay? So you need to make sure of what your obligations are. Now, there's the upside of things as well. And yesterday, one of the trainers came back from a training session and had been talking to a student that was actually at a council, and they shared with me that they had discussed the workplace procedures and reporting procedures for being trapped by moving machinery. And the student had said that they were interested in being able to speak to the council's WHS manager, and she said it was good to be able to think about situations and be prepared for them ahead of time, and relied on her studies to do that. So you've got the person now who's been trained, and they've actually gone back to their manager or coordinator and said, hey, I think we need to think about this. I've learned it. I had a similar situation happen with another council, that there was litigation involved because they had someone spraying chemicals who everyone just assumed, because they've been doing it for so long, had been trained in how to spray chemicals. This person hadn't been sprayed, and they sprayed next to an organic vineyard. And the organic vineyard owner was not very pleased about having chemicals on a windy day blowing across their crop, and the council was sued. So people have to understand if someone's doing the job, they've got to be trained properly. And I'm only sharing these stories so that you can see the benefits that happen, but also the risks that you might be mitigating. Okay, so the training that we need to provide to our teams is not just technical skills, and I'm sure all of you have technical training in the roles that you've had, right? The council's probably trained you. You might have gone to an RTO or the public provider and had training. But more and more supervisors need to understand how to instruct, mentor, and to provide, and I use the quote, safe physical and emotional environment in the workplace. It's crucial to ensure that your supervisors are aware of their responsibilities. So hopefully some of you in the room are, and for you to provide them with the skills and knowledge they need, because it doesn't actually come naturally to everybody. Okay, and in the open spaces sector, there can be a strong macho element, and I'm just saying that looking around the room. So the old thinking of if you're a supervisor and these young guys, they should just toughen up, go down to Bunnings and buy some cement, that actually doesn't hold up in court anymore. So just be careful you don't even utter such words. The law doesn't think the same way as old school thinking. So I want you to take a couple of minutes just at your table to think about risk mitigation strategies, because you don't want to end up on the nightly news, or even worse, on unregulated social media. Social media is horrendous. People can say whatever they want. So if you've got a worker gets out there and makes a claim against you, there's nothing you can really do to get it off social media. So just, if you can just turn to your groups, number one, say, do you feel that you've got training in place in your organisation? Hopefully you're sitting in work groups, and just for 2 minutes, just to talk about what you think might be some of the risks in your environment. Sounds like there were some awesome stories being shared there. Right. I heard some good news stories and I heard some bad news stories just in the couple of tables I was listening to. I was wondering, does anyone brave enough just to say something that they might have observed in their organisation where this is being recognised as a need around training? Otherwise, I'm going to just throw my finger at somebody. What about the very back table with the man in the yellow shirt? If you wear high vis, I'm going to be able to see you.
Paul,
Do you have anything, Paul?
what's the question?
The question is your organisation doing anything around training, particularly perhaps around the whole wellbeing side of things?
Yes, we are. Councils do plenty of stuff regarding that sort of side of things. So we've got things in place. Yep.
Thank you. And I think Andrew over on the table that I was chatting with, he had a little bit of an observation at the front here. Yep. No one has to say where they were.
We're looking at the psychosocial side of things, and the council are doing safety reviews at the moment, and they're trying to get their head around it because they're currently struggling to get the policies into place, and they're just trying to find out how they're going to deal with it, and it's a big change for them.
That's right, because this is all moved from WHS, or moved from HR legislation into WHS, and WHS laws are quite different than HR laws, and so that's why it's really important to be across it. Now, you might say that's up to the HR department to deal with all of that, but you guys need to be aware of what those rules and policies and procedures are. Okay. So, show of hands, does your organisation have a training and development policy? Does your organisation have the adequate budget to put that policy into practice? Not as many hands went up. So I would say if you don't have adequate budget, then you don't actually have a plan, right? You can't, a plan is wonderful, but you've got to actually implement it. And as Clint said, training can be quite an expensive venture. So I encourage you to come and talk to me later about that. But there are different ways to get training that I'll also talk about that aren't so cost prohibitive. Now, does your organisation, again, show of hands, do they have a list of the professional licences held by staff, making sure that they're valid and that they're current? Yeah. How do we know that they're current? Who reviews that? Someone? You're expected to, as a supervisor, you're expected to review it? Okay. It's on a system? Shows dates of currency and expiry. Okay, and so it comes through as a task that's not current. So do most councils have an organisation, we call it a human capital management system like that, where licences are put in, expiries are put in, stuff like that? Okay, that's great, that's important. What about things like criminal history checks? Bit of shaking of the heads there. What about working with children checks? You guys would be working around children quite a bit in schools potentially. Yep. They don't last forever, those checks. They need to be redone every 5 years, I believe. What about driver's licences? Yeah, I talked to someone the other day. I registered a young student there. They gave me their driver's licences ID. I said, mate, this is expired, this licence. He'd been driving the company vehicle. No one had sort of thought to, they saw his licence when they first employed him, but they forgot to make sure it was still valid. That was a bit of a shock. And now, how do you know that the person, and it might be through your system that you've got, but how do you know that they have been adequately trained? So using the example I had before where this person had been doing this thing for a decade, so everyone just assumed that they'd had training, probably back in the days before IT systems monitored it. How do you know that the person, and this is a rhetorical question, how do you know that the person who's doing the job has the adequate training to do that job? Okay. Because sometimes it's like, well, I've always done this. Now, where you store your records might be important. So if you've got an IT system, that's fantastic. If you can get to it through your phone, it's even better. But if it's an IT system that's sitting in an office and you're relying on someone else putting the information in there, you are relying on other people to do your job for you. And that can actually cause a little bit of a problem if you're being held responsible for finding out that information, but it's really hard to find it. So I encourage you all to go and make sure that you can still log in. You haven't forgot your password. You go in there and make sure everyone's records are current. If you don't have a system that does this, I'd be very surprised, but I'm happy to talk to you later with my IT hat on about what systems are out there. Some of them aren't very expensive. So just to recap why training is important. Okay, why training is important is because it brings business benefits to your organisation, right? And that can be around increased productivity, and it can be around the legal compliance aspect of things. It also reduces the risk of non-compliance claims, and it reduces workplace injuries because people know what they're doing and how they're meant to be doing it and how the equipment's meant to be used, and potential litigation from clients, from residents in your case, and also from employees. So some ideas about how you can make sure this is being done properly is if you feel that your council's not properly maybe doing this really well, the state government has a free service and it pulls in all different aspects of different departments. It's called Healthy Workplaces. They will come in and they'll do a bit of a recommendation. They'll look at what practices you've got in, they'll look at your systems and what people are doing, they'll interview staff, and they'll help you come up with a bit of a plan to how to make it an even better place to work. Some councils might have an employee assistance program, okay? Can you put your hand up if there isn't an EAP in your organisation? That's good. Most 50% of the hands went up. That's somewhere that people can go to get help that's de-identified, and they might not want to talk to their manager about it. And then the South Australian, can we go back one? The South Australian Business Chamber also has short courses for leaders and workers, and they'll come and run them at your organisation for you. And I think they take about 1 hour, and it talks all about what I've been saying today, but from a worker's perspective about how you keep yourself emotionally and psychologically safe. There's one for workers, and there's also one for supervisors about how you look after your teams. So they're very cost effective, the SA Business Chamber. Okay? You might want to grab your phone, you might want to take a photo of those, or I can you can come back and I'll give them to you later. And then we're going to go. Okay, so we're going to share some ideas here. We're just going to share now at the table for 2 minutes what you might do based on that information when you go back to work. Do you have the systems in place, or do you need EAPs? And just come up with a little bit of a game plan even in your own booklet. Just write down one idea that you might be able to take back to share with either the HR team or your manager or your chief executive officer. Some of the words that I could hear filtering across the room were things like making sure people don't feel like they're working in a vacuum. So they need their social interactions. So some people's roles might mean that they don't talk to people very much. And how do we include them in group activities, things like that. So there's all sorts of ways that we can support people that don't necessarily mean changing the business, but it might just be being aware of people's needs, both from a technical skills aspect, but also how their day looks. Now get your phone and get ready to scream at me. Get ready to scream at me. Right? Grab your phone. Okay, ready? Show me the money. That was terrible. Do it again. 1, 2, 3. Show me the money. That's better. Okay. Thank you. And then, so there's federal funding available for all of this. So the federal government want to train people. They want Australians to train. Education is actually our 3rd biggest export in this country. When I say export, it's strange. They're coming to us. So it's international students coming here. But the federal government recognised the need for a well-trained workforce, and during COVID, they threw money at companies to train people, right? Now, those buckets have dried up, but there are still places that you can dip into for funding that I'm going to share with you, okay? Now, priority hiring incentive is something that the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations offers. Now, it's actually misnamed. It's not a priority hiring incentive. It's a priority training incentive, right? Now, this money is not just available for new starters. So it's not just available if you're taking an 18-year out of school and putting them on apprenticeship. This priority training funding is available for almost all of the qualifications that the people in this room would be interested in. Horticulture, irrigation, landscape construction, conservation, all those things are covered by this priority training incentive, okay? Now, it's paid to the employing organisation over a 12-month period, and it's $5,000 per student. That's a significant amount of money, okay? It's paid in 2 instalments, 6 months after they start and 12 months after they start. On top of that, the student, I haven't got it here, but on top of that, the student gets $5,000 given to them by the federal government as an incentive, taken back tax out of it. So they don't get quite as much, but it's taxable for them, but they also get $5,000 over 2 years. So there's a big benefit to them being involved in this. So I just wanted to let you know that that money is out there so that when you see training costs $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, the government is paying you as the employers $5,000. They're paying the trainees $5,000. If you can come to some sort of agreement, it basically becomes cost neutral. And then there's all the other benefits that we talked about. So really strongly encourage you to look into this. I have a flyer at the back on our table that you can take a photo of that shows you how to do this. So that's the federal government's incentive at the moment. Now that figure changes, that $5,000 figure changes usually once a year, sometimes twice a year, but that's the figure that's been in effect now for quite a while. Sometimes around election times, that figure goes up. It didn't this election. Okay. These are just some of the qualifications that are eligible for that $5,000 employer incentive. So I would be surprised if yours, whatever you do, is not on there. One that isn't on there is sports turf management. That doesn't qualify, and we are petitioning the federal government to add that to the list. What we do is we put people through horticulture training so they get it, and then we do the rest of it as sports turf specialisation, and we try and make that as cost effective as possible. That's what we do as an RTO so that people don't miss out on the training. Okay, it's important to know that upskilling your workers applies to supervisors and management roles as well. So there's no limit. You can be, I've got students who are 64, 65 years old. There's no limit to who can have this training provided. It can be a certificate 3. So that's if people are unqualified, usually school leavers, but it can be other people. Supervisors and managers. We're going to talk a little bit later about the different levels of training, but everyone is eligible for this. If you're Australian resident, you're eligible. So it's worthwhile talking to your HR teams. Some of them don't know that this exists. Some councils may or may not be eligible, but as far as I know, everyone's eligible. Thank you. Now, the state subsidies, they're not made as cash payments to employers, okay? They are paid to the RTO when a student finishes a subject, okay? So if the student never finishes a subject and they drop out, we don't get paid. So we do our best to help them. We come alongside them. We provide them with a study coach. We help them finish their unit or subject, and then we get paid a small amount of money. I think I get $4 an hour sometimes from the state government to cover the training, and that reduces the cost to the employer. So there's subsidised training in South Australia. Okay, South Australia is very generous around training, but the organisation has to be pre-approved by the South Australian Skills Commission. It is not a difficult process to do, and I can talk you through that if you think your organisation's not, or give my details to your HR team. Okay. So if you want to get a member signed up to do some training, whether it's yourself or one of the team that work for you, what you do is you've got to make sure your organisation's approved with Skills SA. That's number one, not hard. And they usually approve you for 5 years. The next one is decide on the most suitable qualification. If you're supervising people, a certificate 4 is probably the most suitable qualification. And then you want to decide which RTO to use, right? And a list of all of the RTOs you can possibly use is on a particular government website, And I strongly encourage you to call them and find out about how they deliver it, what's the costs, where they do it, how often they do it, that sort of thing, right? It's amazing how many people I turn up to register them for and they haven't even looked at our website, let alone found out what other people do. So decide on the RTO and find out all of their conditions. Next slide. Then you want to contact what we call an Apprenticeship Connect Australia provider. Okay, there's 3 that operate here in South Australia. They'll come out and they'll do all of the government paperwork with you, right? You haven't even talked to me at this point. They're going to do all of the government paperwork and they'll sign you up for the federal government incentives and they'll sign you up for the South Australian subsidies. And then through the magic of the government systems, I'll get an email to say, hey, Julie's has been nominated you to come and be her trainer. And then we go out and we start the process of training them. So that's the steps that have to happen. But really strongly encourage you to look into it for your supervisors and for your managers. It's cost neutral. Okay, are there any questions about that? There's a lot of information to throw at you. I've got information at the back of the room if you need it.
I do.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not sure if you're able to talk about this or happy to talk about this, but recently there's been state government talk about what the term they're using, fee-free TAFE. I know that's a trigger for you. Are you happy to just explain what that means and how that connects to the funding options that you just spoke about?
Yes. I'm also going to talk a little bit about TAFE funding later. The government, you might see on the back of buses, fee-free TAFE, right? There are a very limited number of fee-free TAFE spaces and the students who get them don't know they're going to get them. So they'll go onto the TAFE website, they'll see it says fee-free, they'll go, yeah, that's for me. They sign up, there's only like 2 spots available for that course, right? They don't get one, they all of a sudden get told this is actually going to cost you $4,500 and they pull out, right? So the fee-free TAFE is not available to every course. So horticulture is not a fee-free course at TAFE. Some things that they see as big needs, so potentially young childcare workers. I think there's more fee-free spaces for that, but fee-free TAFE is a little bit of a misnomer because absolutely not all courses are free at TAFE. Okay, and I'll talk about funding a little bit later. Thanks for that question, Clint. Next slide. Okay, vocational education and training. As I said, this is different. It's used to call it tech training, that sort of thing. In Sydney, people still say, I'll go to tech. It's for a particular profession, right? So if you go to uni and you do a Bachelor of Arts, that's not a particular profession. But when you do vet training, it's to get particular skills to have a particular job. And a lovely quote from seek.com.au says, what separates vet training from academic education, which is uni, is that students are taught real skills, knowledges and competencies. I think that's hysterical that they're actually acknowledging that uni doesn't teach you any real skills, but vet training does. Okay, next slide, please. So it improves your job prospects, so people can do vet training before they're employed. It provides practical skills and hands-on experience. So I use the example of if you go to uni and they will give you a textbook on how to drive a car, and then they'll ask you to write an essay about what you learned, and they'll grade the quality of your essay. Right? I don't want to get in the car with that person. You go to vet, they'll give you a textbook, not usually as thick, about how to drive a car, and then a trainer will sit in a car with you and show you how to do it, and then they'll assess you to see that you're competent to drive the car. Right? That's the difference between academic training and vet training. Vet training is actually the practical experience. Okay, thanks. It offers specialised training, so you can specialise in irrigation, you can specialise in sports turf. It's not general training. And it promotes lifelong learning and skills. Now, some people here may know the man up there, the celebrity in the room, from Playford Council, I think he is. So the Certificate 2 is offered to school students. We don't do that. It's very uncommon, but some things like beauty therapy might do that. Certificate 3 is for apprentices and for unqualified people. So they can join the work, they can move across, they've been a carpenter, they're moving into landscaping, and they can do a Certificate 3 because they haven't got the qualifications associated with landscaping. Certificate 4 is aimed at supervisors. So instead of just how to follow a WHS procedure, it's around how to administer and make sure these things are being covered. So it's all about supervising people. And then the diploma is more for managers and business owners, people who might be dealing with budgets tenders, writing reports, having to come up with performance management of staff, that would come under a diploma. Okay. Next. So talking about TAFE, the vet students in South Australia, there are approximately 298,000, that's called 300,000 people currently studying vocational education in South Australia. There's 230 RTOs in South Australia, one of which is TAFE. Okay, so you can see here that TAFE have 42,000 students. The rest of us have 283,000 students. So that represents 5% of the students doing vocational education in South Australia go to TAFE. 95% of them come to us. And people like ARO, the HIA, PEER, ATEC, Motor Trade Association, we all have RTOs. So that's what I talk about when I talk about the other 95%. That's where they go. Okay, next one. I'm not going to say too much about this because it could be considered a political statement, but for the 5% of students that go to TAFE, they receive 65% of the government funding available, right? I couldn't run my business like that, but that's the statistics in South Australia at the moment. So 5% of the students get 65% of the funding. Now, this is the national funding landscape. It's actually good. Sadly, that's good. South Australia is the best. They are 36% of money of their budget goes to private RTOs. I'm just going to leave it there. But it had to be said because when I say to you that we have participant fees, the reason is because we don't get all of that money. So the way that it's all administered, ASQA, we are audited annually, every 7 years by ASQA, we're audited annually by the South Australian Government. Every RTO is, we all have a number. Then there is the Skills Insight. Now they're quite important. They're the ones who set the curriculum. So I don't just decide what to teach. They set the curriculum and they look after our sector. So if you have a call from Skills Insight or if you have any way of influencing Skills Insight, come and talk to me because that's how you're going to change. They're getting the workforce ready for the future. And so that's a federal government organisation. Skills SA, actually they're awesome. Skills SA is really good. They provide funding and they're the ones who have got this vision of where the state's going to go, what sort of people we're going to need in the room, and they provide funding for that. So the curriculum, we don't just make it up. As I said, it's all mandated, what we teach and how we teach it. Every unit has knowledge, so things that they have to answer, questions they have to answer, and performance activities they have to do to be graded as competent, okay? And we, as an RTO, try really hard to contextualise that. So we will be at a huge almond farm in Berry one day, and then we'll be at a golf course the next day, and we'll be in garden maintenance in the Adelaide Hills the next day. So irrigation in all those places is really different. So we try very hard to contextualise it for the students. So the key takeaways from this part is VET is not just for people studying their careers, it's for everybody. And they're the types of certificates and diplomas that you should be thinking about for your teams so that you're covering off that risk mitigation of do they know what they're meant to be doing. I'm not going to have any questions because we don't have time. Now, ARO College, I do have to do a little plug for what we do. So we're based in Harndorf. This is some of our team. And I say if you can grow it, curate it, crop it, cut it or kill it, we teach it. Okay, so I don't want to be teaching other things. People say, why don't you go into business subject? No, I don't want to do that. This is what we do. We're green. We keep it green. And so we have teams who are sports turf specialists. What I tend to do, and this sounds terrible, and Chris, don't repeat this, what I do is I find people in the industry who are maybe in their 40s, early 50s, who potentially don't want to work on the tools anymore. They might have, their hips might have gone, their shoulders might have gone, but they love people. They want to give back to the industry. So we employ them as what we call a study coach. And then we go through and we put them through their training and assessing qualifications. And then they become excellent teachers. And one's standing at the back of the room. You're going to hear from him in a minute. Not that I'm calling him old. So I'm going to introduce you now to Chris Baker. So some of you know Chris. Chris is originally from the UK. He has massive amounts of sports turf management experience, irrigation experience, horticulture experience. And I would like to ask him to talk a little bit about mentoring and what he's seen work well and what he's seen work poorly, because this doesn't cost, as I said, this just costs time, it doesn't cost money. So Chris, do you want to come and just share some of your stories with us for maybe 5 minutes? Thank you.
Morning all, and thank you for all coming today. So yeah, I'm sports turf background. Actually, when I first arrived in Australia, I worked casually at this place for 3 months. So it's quite nice to come back here and see the grass still looking in very, very good condition. Mentoring, it's a really, really important thing in the workplace. And as Judy said, it costs you nothing. And I've been a mentee and a mentor throughout my career, and it's grown me in more ways than I can ever say. I think the biggest benefits from mentoring is that you can use it with new staff, underskilled staff, and staff that are struggling in the workplace, and you just put them with an experienced, trusting member of your staff, and you allow them to work one-on-one. And the experienced guy can really mentor and motivate the young team member into what you are trying to get from them. If you're training them, you want them to understand the way you need to work. And by having an experienced guy working alongside that person on a one-on-one relationship, they get the benefits of learning that process a lot quicker. And it builds that team relationship between those two people. And it's also benefiting the guy who's being the mentor, because that guy can be somebody who's going into a supervisory role. So he's working one-on-one with a younger, inexperienced person and growing those supervisory skills to benefit them moving forward in the workplace. So you get two benefits. You get a young, inexperienced or struggling worker getting guidance into the workplace, and an experienced worker who's then moving on into supervising people during their day-to-day work. And it allows you to really hone in those skills. And from a training point of view, we train, we go out, we do it on the work site, we go through their workbooks, we give them some basic training knowledge, but we cannot provide them with all the training they need to understand every unit that they qualify in. So having a mentor working with an apprentice and then supporting that training that they're getting from us, it means that they understand how that relates to them in the workplace, and they get more motivated from the training they're doing because they can see how to move forward with that. Do any of you do mentoring throughout your workplaces? No?
You might find that people aren't formally mentoring, but
Yeah, there's a lot of informal mentoring. I guess just that, you have a young apprentice and you are just mentoring them in the job you want to do. But I think setting out formally, especially with very inexperienced young staff, and also staff that you notice are struggling in the workplace, having a formal setup where that mentor or the mentee has a specific mentor for a period of time that they are able to go to, ask questions. They don't have to keep bugging the supervisors. It really does create great benefits within a workplace. And you all work in pretty good big teams in council spaces. So being able to have a young apprentice that's got a specific person that they can go to for guidance in their day-to-day tasks, their studies as well, go to your mentor, ask your mentor who's more experienced. I'm doing this in my studies at the moment. What does this mean? Asking the questions, it really creates a really good team relationship within the businesses. So maybe that's something you can consider moving forward with younger and less experienced team members, is putting one-on-one mentor-menteeships into those workplaces and seeing if that improves these young people coming through the industry. And that's about it from me, unless anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Doesn't usually talk in front of groups, so thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. So we're just going to really quickly recap. So the recap is that we have the business benefits and risk mitigation that's involved in good training. Doesn't have to be formal paid training. That we have federal funding available to the employers and the employees. We have state government subsidising everything that happens. VET is really important because it provides skills, not just academic knowledge. And there's a value in mentoring, and I'm sure Chris would be happy to talk to anybody about what he's seen. So I'm going to hand back to our host. Thanks, Clint.
Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you, Chris.